Welcome to Speak Up. This week we have a very special guest coming to speak to us about the connection between yoga and mental health and the impact it has on young people. Her name is Anvita Dixit and she comes from India and she's moved here, I think, a couple months ago.
Yep.
So I'm excited for her to tell us her journey and what she discovered. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Pauline. It's fantastic to be here. And I just moved to London in September, actually, so it hasn't been that long. But I'm super excited to share, the connection between yoga and mental health and how that's impacted the way I think of mental health as a whole. So just to tell you a little bit about myself and where I come from, I actually grew up at a yoga institution in Bombay, which is obviously a very unique way of growing up.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was, and at the time, obviously, you don't realize what a blessing it is. You're just like, oh God, everyone's doing yoga all the time, and you don't see it for what it can be. And then I think slowly growing up, when I was about 13 or 14, I started to see how, because I was practicing yoga and I understood myself better, my reactions to difficult situations were more calm and more controlled.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially, when you're in that middle school age group, there's so many things that are coming at you and you don't really understand what your mental health is all about. And that's when I realized what yoga can do for mental health and how it can bridge that gap there. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Amazing. And how did that sort of come about? When was the time when you realized that it was really having an effect with your mind?
Right. I think especially when I was about 15, we had yoga as a subject in school. So we actually, it was great. So I had it at home all the time. But you know how it is, like if your parents are telling you something and they're like, this is good for you, you're like, no. But then when someone else teaches it to you at school, then you are kind of drawn to it more because it's coming to you from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so it came to me in school and I realized that even small things, like let's say, for example, we had a test coming up and it was 100% of the grade. I would see people panicking before that. They would their body would get all stiff. They'd be like, they'd sweat. Yeah. They'd be like, oh my God. And I would chant Om before the test because I was like, that's what I always do. That's the thing. Yeah. So it's not just, Om works for me because that's yoga, but in general, like sound vibrations, understanding your breathing pattern, calming yourself down, having control over that. And the test is just the situation I have, but it could be any situation in life. Just you having that control over yourself is, I think, what matters the most. So I realized that yoga was doing that for me and my mental health.
That's incredible. Yeah. And so how old were you when you started practicing yoga?
So I was 5 when I first started.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was just, because I obviously grew up there and I was 5. But when I started taking it more seriously, I think it was 15 when I started in school, because then you had exams, right? So we had to do asanas and the postures for the exam and then also write about mental health as an examination. So that was very,
that's
very
incredible.
Cool. Yeah.
And now having moved to London, how are you managing to balance practicing your yoga?
Yeah. It's definitely hard. Yeah. Because, so when I lived back home, I was an early riser. I would wake up at about 5:30 and that was just my routine. But things are very different here. People like to, especially when you first get here, it's like, we need to go here, we need to go to this pub, we need to go there. Yes. And it's very difficult to sort of get your routine in order. And I had to almost force myself to do that and make that transition and be mindful of where my energy was going and what I was letting into my life in a new city. So I had to be mindful of that. But I think I'm always careful about what I'm ingesting, whether that's mental or whether that's physical. So even food, but even, for example, when we're scrolling through Instagram, we don't realize, but that content is making us think a particular way. So I'm really careful who I'm friends with, what I'm doing with my time, and how I balance that out. And I think that's kept me sane.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely agree with Instagram and I think it's hard because every day we just get things thrown at us. Yeah. And London is such a hard place, I think, to be healthy. Yeah. Because there's like temptations everywhere. And it's hard to wait because I'm an early riser as well. Yeah. But sometimes, I will go to the pub or I will stay up and then try and wake up. But
and then it's like, oops.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't work. Like you can't do both. So I think you have to choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what are kind of the main things that you've learnt about, if there was a young person who really wanted to start yoga to improve their mental health,
right?
What would you say to them?
So I think firstly, just understanding that there's a voice inside of you that knows better. I think acknowledging that, because sometimes we're so caught up in it's just me, this one entity, that we don't realize we have that inner voice or that subconscious voice that can guide us. And in order to move towards yoga, the first step is to acknowledge that okay, I'm not in this journey alone. It's like you're driving in a car and there's someone that's actually driving and there's somebody sitting in the passenger seat. So we always identify with that person who's driving, but there is someone in that passenger seat, that's your inner voice. And if you allow it to speak to you well, and if you listen, it can guide you and say, hey, go down that road, take a right there, do this. But if you're not listening, it starts to sort of scream at you, aren't you listening to what I'm saying? Go this way. So you have to kind of understand that inner voice, become friends with it, and allow it to steer your life instead of you constantly thinking, I'm the only driver here and I'm the only one who knows what to do. So understanding that and then starting to build your yoga practice will help.
Wow, that's so interesting. I think you're right. I think you do tend to just go with instinct sometimes, even though there is someone there that knows better. And so how often do you practice yoga? Every day, I assume? Yeah,
every day. And I think it's a little difficult again because you're in a new city and stuff. But every time I don't practice yoga, it's because I've been doing it for so many years. It's not like a massive change, but the day I don't do it, I can tell the slight difference. I'm slightly more on edge, or I'm not as calm as I can be. I can always tell like the difference. And I think the most important thing is, for me, yoga isn't just, I can do a split or, something that's more physical. It's more like a meeting with myself. And I think if we meet so many people in our lives and we're always out and about, it's important to just kind of meet yourself and have that discussion with you before you have it with others. So
that's so interesting. And do you do the people around you practice yoga?
So luckily, very fortunately, especially back home, a lot of my friends took yoga as an elective subject along with me. So it was all of us like, yes, mental health.
That is so cool.
It was really cool to have your friends think the same way. And, it's like, okay, we found our tribe. We're all thinking the same way. And then over here, obviously, it's difficult because, again, sometimes the way yoga and mental health gets seen now, I'm sure, it's like, some people think of it more as a business these days, and it's more monetary, it's more superficial in a way, which makes it difficult to find the right tribe here because everybody has different ideologies of what it is. So it's a little hard, but I'm trying to find my way around to the right people. So
and do you find a big difference between the sort of Western and Eastern ideas of yoga? Because obviously yoga's from India, but people have people even call it cultural appropriation here. What do you think about that?
So for me, I think it's fantastic that at least the seed of the idea has spread so far and it's prominent in the West and people are taking to it. I just think the way that it's being taken to can be improved. So, for example, again, there's so much emphasis on the physicality. Yoga pants as a hashtag, which I find, that's incredible because back home, it's just a lifestyle. That's just how we live. Like, we do yoga as part of our day-to-day routine. We don't think of it as, I'm going to a yoga class. We think of it as, I'm in yoga. I breathe it, I'm doing it. And I think one of the most important things my grandfather used to say, who again ran the yoga institution, is that yoga is not just this 1 hour class that you do and then you're, the rest of the 23 hours of the day you're any kind of person. It's the 23 hours outside the yoga class. Who you are in those 23 hours makes you a yogi or doesn't make you a yogi. So I think that kind of is important for the West to accept and realize. So I don't want to criticize it. It's great because there's so much physical emphasis, but it can be improved a bit and taken to its essence a bit closer.
No, because I think here it is definitely people go for an hour class and sometimes it's really expensive. And we don't really get taught the history of it. But maybe speak a bit more about the lifestyle. Because that's really interesting and how that affects what it was like for you, for example, having it in your lifestyle.
Yeah, fantastic. So one thing that people don't understand about yoga, again, is that there are a lot of cleansing practices involved in it. So literally like how we brush our teeth. There are practices where you kind of clean your nostrils, you pour water through it, it comes out from the other nostril. And it sounds crazy, but that was part of our lifestyle and routine. And the reason we do that is because we believe the nostrils and the breathing apparatus kind of dictates how you behave and what your state of mind is like. So, for example, the minute your nostrils are blocked or you have sinus, you feel really uncomfortable. But also what it's doing is not balancing out your energies. So we believe the left nostril is the cooling energy and the right nostril is the heat energy. Minute one gets blocked, there's an imbalance of energy in your system. So the first thing we would do when we wake up is clean up that system. Because then I can carry through the day and I'll be fine. And then we would start the day with doing asanas. So that kind of makes sure your physical body is in shape and it's also your circulation is proper, everything's great. And then you kind of start your day. And then you do whatever it is that's on your list, to-do list, and go through it. And then at the end of the day, towards the evening, like 6:37, we try and meditate for about 15-20 minutes to reflect on the day and see what we've learned today, what are we grateful for, and how can we assimilate this into the future. So it was just a part of who we became. Yeah. And I think that kind of is lacking here because we don't think of it as something, as a lifestyle. And even the food, like now veganism has become quite a thing. But in India, most of us, not everyone, but most of us are vegetarian. So again, that just came from, we have respect for all living entities. We don't want to kill them necessarily. And that again was a lifestyle. So yeah, that's just kind of how we lived and grew up. And it manifests in the way that we respect people and in our cultural traditions and the festivals and the feeling of community. So yeah, there are a lot of facets that it shows up in.
Oh, that's amazing. And I just find it fascinating, like putting in your lifestyle. Is it hard, like, let's say you were not at home and you didn't have your normal routine. How do you try and keep that, like meditation? Are you able to adapt it if you go somewhere else? So?
It's definitely difficult. And I think that it starts with a commitment to want to meet you no matter where you go. And it can be very nerve-wracking. So I remember the first 2 weeks that I came here, I felt like I was in a haze because things were just happening. You have to get bed sheets and you have to do your thing. And in the midst of all that, it's difficult to want to say, oh, but I need to sit down and meditate. But I think the commitment to want to be better and to want to be your best self every single day, that's what will draw you towards, let me just sit down and talk to myself, because otherwise it's not going to happen. And I think so, for example, if you go on vacation or if you're in an environment that's not home for you, you have to still want to be the best you. It's just as simple as that, but it's really hard to stick to it. So I think it depends on what your goals are, but as long as you have that essential commitment to you, you should be fine.
Amazing. And what do you want to do now? Like, what is your sort of intentions now to do with what you've learned?
So I think I was really fortunate to, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of information on the history of yoga. And one of the reasons that is because 5,000 years ago when it was formulated and it kind of emerged in the Indus Valley civilization in India, what had happened at that time was Sanskrit was the predominant language. And now barely 2 or 3% of the world population speak that language. Wow. So even we don't speak it. I mean, in India, we speak Hindi, which is a transformation of like an evolution of Sanskrit, but it's not the same language. So all the texts, everything that has yogic information was written in Sanskrit. So the problem is barely anyone understands it. So it's like this mystical, cool language, but no one gets it. And that's why there's so much misinformation, or rather different information about yoga, because who is the authority that's going to decipher everything that was written in those books, you know? So that's, I think, one of the reasons that it's difficult to understand the where yoga essentially comes from. And so what I want to do is, I've had the access to that while growing up. I didn't see it at the time as a blessing, but now I'm like, oh my God, I had that. So all I want to do is serve as a medium to sort of take that information and throw it out there and say, hey, I know everyone can't decipher this, but let me just translate all of the Sanskrit stuff into English and Hindi that people can understand and that it can help their mental health to improve. So especially students in the age group of 18 to 25, that's kind of really what I'm looking at, and more so in India. But obviously now that I'm here, I want to do it in English and help people here understand and remove any kind of misconceptions that they may have about yoga and what it can do.
Amazing. Yeah, because I think it's definitely it has a lot of connotations here. It's like yummy mummies. I don't know if you heard that term, but like things like that. Not always. I mean, like not somewhere like STOAS. But you still you do have that, and it's. I think it is important to have the history because a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you sort of use like social media to advocate for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think initially I was always like, social media. Do I want to I don't want to, because you're always afraid of, I don't want to be some sort of sellout in the process. And eventually I realized, I was like, you know what? It's just about you carrying out your duty. This is the platform our generation has right now. And it would almost be stupid to not use it constructively to send out the message that you want to, send out. So currently I use Instagram and YouTube to sort of create content, but I'm really mindful. I'm careful that I'm not, because there's a fine line between giving out a message and then only making monetary profit out of it. And for me, I'd never want to be in that situation where it's not a business for me. It's not something that I want to monetize. I want it to be a channel, and I wanted to just give out information for the sake of information, not because I want to profit off of it. So I'm consciously studying a different subject so that I can earn my living off of that and support myself financially, but at the same time keep the Instagram and YouTube stuff going, because that's important to me as well, and I don't want to make money off of it. So
that's amazing. And so like right now what you're studying, what kind of what is your aims with that?
So I'm studying cultural and creative industries, again very closely linked with yoga and media. So what I want to do in the future with that is start to work with organizations in India that are supporting fitness and mental health revolutions, but they're doing it in more offline ways. So let's say they're setting up a gym, or they're setting up a kitchen that prepares only sattvic vegetarian food. So that's more of an infrastructural system, and I don't mind that being a business because it's not per se spiritual. It's more like a functional service, so that's fine. And that's kind of what I'm trying to look into. And so I'm trying to enhance my media skills to then use that to promote those services or businesses that are trying to promote healthy living, and in the process then keep spirituality a little away and not mix it up with the more business or monetary aspects.
Amazing. And what kind of what kind of advice would you give to, I mean, you already said a bit before about starting yoga and things like that, but how do you have any examples of times when you know that yoga has really helped your mental health?
I think for me, so this is one instance, and I mentioned this quite a lot, but rather there are two actually. So one is I used to play football when I was younger, and I wasn't very good at it. So I was a good basketball player, but I was really not good at football, and I was always goalkeeper because my legs didn't work. So I was goalkeeper. I was good with my hands. I was goalie, and I was really tall. But the issue was one of the one of the matches that we had, I couldn't save even one of the goals, and we lost 4-0, and it was really, really heartbreaking for me, because it's not like your team blames you, but you are the goalkeeper, you are the last man or woman standing, so it's kind of your responsibility. And I remember coming home and just crying, and I cried for 2 days because the next match was after 2 days, and I was just really upset. I was like, why can I not do this? I mean, why is this my weakness? And after crying for those 2 days, at the end of the second day, I remember I was just like, okay, I need to talk to myself. This is not going to help. And I came to my breath, and I was just like, what is the problem? Why are we not able to achieve this? And then I realized, I was like, it's because I'm not trying. And when the ball is being kicked into the goal, I'm already like, oh, it's going to be a goal. I'm not even trying to dive or save it. I'm not even giving it my 100%. So having that conversation with myself was life-changing, and by that I mean the next match that we had, I was like, that's it, you come next to me with that ball and it's not going in the goal. And it was brilliant, because a shift of self-talk and a shift of my mentality, and I saved every goal. We literally, it was, and to me, I'm getting goosebumps again. It was incredible. And then the thing is, there were a lot of news reporters that would be there at the matches, and I was diving all over the place, and I've never done this before. So after it got over, they actually came to me and took my interview, because they were like, that was one of the most fantastic goalkeeping that we've ever seen. And then that article came in the newspaper. And I was like, just 2 days ago, I couldn't even save one goal.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I think it came only from being able to speak to myself.
Yeah, having the power to
change it.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've done yoga a couple of times, and I know that the being able to be in touch with myself physically, like just even and being able to like actually feel like myself and like it's actually amazing.
It's like I understand who I am now.
And just being able to like reflect back and think like so many times I think we fail before we have even tried. And it does happen so much.
Absolutely. So I think, like you mentioned, in terms of advice, I think it would definitely be just to stay in the present moment and don't do yourself a disservice by not living up to your potential, because we have so much. It's just that we're scared to express it. So I think don't have fear, and even if you do, accept fear and failure as just part of the process and do it anyway.
In terms of doing other sort of fitness stuff, how does that incorporate with the yoga and how much, what other kind of fitness stuff do you do?
Right. So I love dancing. I dance a lot.
Yeah, I've seen on your Instagram. It's amazing.
So thank you. So I think for me it's a creative release and I really enjoy it. So I try to take on Zumba because that's a very cardio intense activity, and it's sometimes I personally don't prefer the gym that much, just because I feel like it's an artificial it's a simulated environment, and I prefer rather sports or dance because I feel the emotion and I'm really in it. And when I was younger, like I said, I used to play football, basketball and badminton, so that kind of kept my fitness in check. Actually I wanted to be a professional badminton player when I was younger, but I had a kneecap dislocation and couldn't. That's another story. But basically it came from the grounding of sports early on, and now I don't play competitive sports anymore, but I take Zumba on and I try to make sure I'm doing strength training on my own. So I refer to different programs. One program I'd like to mention is by Shona Virtue. It's called the Virtue Method. That really helped me understand strengthening and conditioning better. So I try to balance cardio and strength training along with my asana and yoga practice, and that kind of works for me. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
And you do fitness pretty much every day then?
Yeah, I would say.
That's amazing. And how... And a bit maybe going a bit back on your childhood.
Yes.
What was it like growing up in the yoga institution?
Oh, it was honestly, it was like a yoga wonderland. It was really like, because it was so... You can imagine every single member that came in there to practice yoga. So we're not 24/7, but like we're almost a 9 to 7 kind of an institution. We start pretty early. Okay, wait, I'm going to say this again. It was we start at 6 a.m. and it finishes at about 8 p.m. So it's pretty much the whole day. And we'd have members coming in, and I used to wait for my bus early in the morning to go to school, and I'd see all these members coming in, touching the staircase of the institution and putting their head to it out of reverence and out of like just for what it's given them. And that itself is like, wow, that's much incredible. Because it's not worship, but it's more just like appreciation and gratitude. And then apart from that, I think every time so my alarm clock was always people chanting Om, because they would chant it so loudly downstairs in the workshops that you would wake up, so you didn't actually need an alarm clock. It was just Om so loudly that you're like, okay, I'm awake. And it's those moments where you're like, I'm so blessed, because no one else, I mean, it's hard to grow up like that. And the kind of food that we ate in the institution, just the kind of energy, if so many people are chanting Om, doing yoga, coming to that institution, expressing gratitude, that energy builds up in the area. And then living, breathing in that is it's something else, and it shapes who you become, really. So that for me was just like a wonderland. And even now, if someone asks me where do you want to be, and in the future, which city would you like to be in, I'm like, no, I want my yoga wonderland, because that's home. You can't match it with anything else.
For sure. And do you think that you're gonna in the future go back?
I definitely. So I like, for me at the moment, I wouldn't mind staying for probably another year in London just to gain experience or something. But in the long run, I definitely want to be back in India, not necessarily maybe in Bombay, because I know there are different cities that need this education, but in India for sure, because I understand the challenges there, and I understand the opportunities, and I think it's important to give back to the community that made you who you are. So I think for me, I'm really a teacher at heart, if you put it that way. And I want to teach people. Now, whether that's through offline mediums or online mediums, it's fine. I just want to, for me, I think through Instagram and through YouTube, what I wish to do really is to encourage that audience to have an offline experience. Because I think yoga, theoretically, you can understand it. So I think it's great to just give out information and to have people understand, but it's important to experience it. And so I always want to request people or start to draw them towards experiencing it. And it doesn't have to be with me. It can just be find a yoga institution near you. Go there. Experience it instead of just sitting behind a screen. And I think what's happening nowadays, which I don't entirely agree with, is we're trying to get apps to replace the experience or the offline experience, which I don't personally encourage, because I think offline experiences are still as important. So even if you might have an app that teaches you meditation or that helps you, it's important to actually go to an in-person teacher and take maybe one class a week. Maybe you see them once a year, but just to have that guru really, I think is important. So
no, that's so true. Yeah. Because I mean, there's so many apps now, and I remember even now more so than even 2-3 years ago. Yeah. There's so many, and all the mindfulness stuff, which is basically just meditation, and has been just sort of like rebranded in a way for the West. And I know so many of one of my friends' mum is Buddhist, and she's very much against this whole concept of mindfulness and these apps. And I completely agree. I think the experience that you can have in person
is much more. And I think it's the way the West does it and the way the business models work. It's not like I have a direct issue with it, but I just think it can be made better. Because I think getting to the essence is what's important, and that sometimes is lacking, because if you see it only as a business opportunity, then you're going to use it that way. But if you see it for what it is, at its depth and at its core, then you can be a little more sensitive to it. So I mean, I don't have an issue. I wouldn't say, oh my God, what are you doing? But I would say you try and educate yourself a bit more before you take something on like that. Yeah. So one thing I learned, which initially I didn't know, my teachers told me, is that sometimes when a person is depressed, and if you immediately ask them to meditate, it can be a bit difficult for them, because they're already in a thought process that is negative and that is, taking them down a certain path. And if you ask them to stay in meditation, it's easy for that thought process to overcome them, and they might not feel good at all. It might just be like, I don't want to meditate because it made me feel worse. So sometimes for people who are feeling depressed and the energy levels are low, we try to give them more asanas and more postures to bring the energy levels slightly back up. And when that physiological change is there and they feel better and blood circulation's improved, there are more endorphins in their system, then we start introducing meditation. So you kind of have to be careful, and you have to understand who your student is. It might work for some people, but largely you kind of have to give them more physical practices first.
Amazing. That's so interesting.